This is actually a new research. It's the first time I show this piece. How I can approach to the same topics where I'm working in the last years, but in the different manner, in the different way. I love to do that kind of things, things with a little details. These structures take me a long time to do because have to stick this little graphite is too difficult to make it because the surface of the graphite is so soft and it's too easy to don't stick and keep together. With the time I explore many different glues and find this. Begin to realize also the time to take me make these artworks is the time to think in the ideas and reflect about what I'm doing and why what I'm doing this. And begin to grow the idea of the square like a concept created by the human. Doesn't exist nothing in the nature compares to a perfect square. For me, that's what I mean, or is closer than time structures. Is the things or the concept like the human we are created to have certain things. The square for me is represent all our social and economic our structure like a society is a square. We try to give the shape to the nature with our forces and control the shape. We are any times violent the nature. That's what I'm trying to do in this piece. Is on a start point. I don't know how going to change, or maybe I don't know. By the first time in many years, I try to don't control any detail. I just let to happen things and allow to the materials show me what will happen with the pieces.
For me, it was interesting in the work of Camilo that the graffito, it's a mineral and comes from mountains, no? And in the mountains, it's pretty stable, strong, and yeah, it's like so strong. And then it goes to something that you used to draw, and then it goes like dying, like in the time. And then he makes these structures that are a bit similar to strong structures, like in the construction fields, and they become fragile. So it's like a material that changed on time, and it made me feel that that was beautiful, like somehow a material changing and becoming fragile, and that was strong in a moment, and that was for me like beautiful.
My work is in the corner. There's two soap carvings. When I was about 18 years old, I was in prison. I was serving a 6-year sentence, so I did 3 years inside and 3 years on probation afterwards in the UK. At the time, I was spending 24 hours a day in a cell, and I was allowed out for a shower once or twice a week and a phone call once a week. So there was a lot of time inside just to contemplate in that small space. I started just working from memory, and I made a piece called Prison Culture, which is a series of 99 bars of soap, and on each one there's a memory of prison. So it could be an object or space or the language that's used inside. So the two pieces in the corner, the soap carvings, are slightly bigger. I have begun to chop the bars of soap up. It's prison soap that I use, and make bigger canvases, I'd call them, bigger objects to carve into, so I can start putting figures and larger spaces inside. The one on the left is of two people that are eating food in a cell, and when you're sharing that small space with somebody else, anything can turn into a conflict, whether it's just eating food, and it's that kind of hierarchy in the cell of, you're not eating my food, so the arm is hovering over the plate quite strong and firm that, no, this is my food. And in that small space, you kind of make up your own rules and your own behaviours. It talks about that dynamic, or that challenge between two people living in such a small space for such a long time. When I was in a cell 24 hours a day, that was only for 5 months of I say only, that was for 5 months of the 3 years. And afterwards I moved to another prison, and we were allowed out, I was working during the day, and we were allowed to associate for 1 hour with everybody else, and we could play pool. And pool on the outside, people just play pool. You just, associate with your friends, or you might go for dinner. But inside pool is such a huge thing, and it is quite a potentially hostile environment, because there is these things that could be used as weapons, potentially, but people don't, because they know if they do, then the pool table will be taken away from them. So there's this level of trust. I think that's what this series of work does. It talks about the humanness between people inside, on such a domestic object and fragile surface of using soap. It has other layers and connotations of it purifying skin, and in a way making art purified my way of thinking, and using soap was such a raw material at the time. This is all I had.
The starting point is always the urban ruins, the city, decay. That has always given me material to think about and to meditate and to work. And what I started to do was these recollections of these remains of the city. The recollections started always places that were gone already for different reasons, but usually architecture in ruins. No, I don't know why, but it's the trigger. It was the trigger in the city to start looking at those voids that are left. That the destruction in architecture can be quite violent and radical, and you feel that void sculpturally, I think, when you walk through the city. That research of looking for the voids and understanding the materiality of these spaces, that was actually a question of there's no longer an image, there's no longer a space, and we have all this big void. If I want to transfer all these feelings, emotions, and thoughts into material again, what the material should be. No? So I've been exploring different options. I usually work with well-found materials always, and things that carry a lot of previous use and abuse, I guess. So they are already charged, no? Like they have this story to tell. And I guess the process has been unraveling that story, unweaving the story, or taking apart the layers that are compressing something that is hidden inside. So it's a very archaeological method, in an amateur way, of course. But I think we have, as artists, most of us in this exhibition for sure, have a lot to do with archaeology. And in my case, I think I'm in this intersection of interest between sculpture, architecture, archaeology, and history, and recently geology. But all of them are intertwined. It's impossible not to think of that in the same area of thought. Specifically, these two pieces are recent, as I told you, but it's all the same obsessions of all. emptiness, the void, the ruin, and I guess the entropy of those processes and cycles of the city, destruction and construction, verticality and horizontality. And they are recollections as well, in this case photography, because when I cannot bring the rubble or the debris with me into the studio, that's my usual method. I take a photo. The photo becomes material and becomes image, but also in the case of the textile, it's an image that is about to disappear. That's why I really like the textile print or transfer into veil, because it's almost a ghost. So I was giving this consideration of what materiality these images should acquire once transformed and translated. I'm still, chasing the possibilities, but right now the textile has me completely overwhelmed with all that it could, all the potential. For me, the video, it's talking about this textile unweaving as well, because as you can tell, it's like this reading the mountain and then reading the ruin upside down. But it's like this method of Western reading from left to right. And for me, it's also the unweaving. The image is dissolving and is merging itself into the ground and appearing again upside down as a ruin already. So it's, of course, a question about the cycles when you think about time.
The sound of the video?
Yes, the video was a collaboration because I had no idea about video before. So
you didn't?
Many people, no, well, few, but not
okay.
Really. It's a completely whole language and universe. So it was a group effort, actually. We worked with a composer from Colombia. She's called Melissa Vargas, and she is the son of a lithologist. So she went with her father to the mountain and recorded the sound of the mountain, and something that our ear cannot tell that is happening in the video is that the sound reversed as soon as the image changes, as soon as we go into this darkness and the image appears upside down. It's the same sound but reversed. So it's a very subtle observation as well on the cycle of this sound involving the image and involving the viewer into this discovery or reading. It's called interpretation of deep time. And deep time is this beautiful term that the geologists give to the time of Earth. So everything started because I wanted to understand the strata on a mountain. And it's like a clock. Like you're really, when geologists are trained, they train their eye to understand the ages of a place by the stratification of a mountain or a cut.
My work are the portraits in resin. The start of the work were photos from a cemetery here in Ghent. And the photos were faded in time. Faded in time. And for me, the photos were beautiful, but also sad, because the real people, the real portraits, you couldn't read them anymore. And I take pictures of all those photos in the cemetery. I painted. It was difficult to translate it with verf.
Paint.
Paint. And then I made a copy of it, of the paintings, and put them in resin. I think I wanted to conserve the people, the pictures of the dead people. I wanted to freeze them in resin, to hold them and not to lose the memories. In my own life, it's difficult to hold the memories from the people I loved and lost.
And your practice is usually in painting, or you do?
Mostly I'm a painter. Sometimes textiles.
Here, the portraits are always in black and white, or?
They are colored.
Ah, they are color. Okay.
Brown and
Okay.
mostly my colors are very quiet.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Faded colors too,
Yeah. Colors good.
like time and vanishing colors.
Yeah.
I took it was a thing I found, and it's context of a photographer of 1879. I looked at it and I was amazed by the experiment in that time of a photographer just playing with images, playing with developing images. He did a lot of countries. There was a lot of whole interested in many things, and he traveled a lot. So what he did was very experimental, and in the time amazing, because he did a lot of continents. 1879, so playful that it must have been a hobby, must have been something like the joie de vivre, a joyful life made by photographs, that attracted me to 140 years after to make a study of what he made and pick the things out for a further experiment. So he was like demolishing babies in baths and put crayon over the faces, and a grandmother projected on another piece of house, and that was his contact. So it's something like, okay, this play he did, I want to play further 140 years after. So that's the time dimension that's in it. It was an experiment of putting those things, enlarge them on paper, a kind of the same time. So it's another thing I found was old paper just vanishing, and use it as a background. So I wanted to conserve it, and that's what SONJA does too with the dead people, to conserve it and conceal it in resin. The object in the front is kind of 3D, instant melting of an object. So time goes fast, melts the object over the concept that is hanging on the wall. So the melting process would cover, if time is ready to cover it and the temperature too, to melt it in the same concept and hanging it back on the wall. So making circles from some living thing in these 20 days. If time goes, if time is my friend there, it would conceive the same element to put again on the wall. So the circle is round then.
Well, what I do is basically I go to buildings. I'm constantly like thinking on the time since I'm really young, because I had like something that impacted me. So then since long time ago walking in the cities and realizing that there were like abandoned houses and abandoned buildings, and then they were falling, and then some were demolished, and then some were like restored. I had to find a way to stop it. Like I felt like that. So then I studied art, but that didn't solve like the problem. So after a while, I was thinking like, okay, what should I do? Problem that I'm feeling like they are going. So I felt like, okay, let's try to speak with them, to have a conversation with them. So what I do is that I go and approach to walls that are silent, and I start to speak with them by scratching and like by finding what is there and trying to grab something of those realities and see what I find, like what colors I find, what materials, what layers. And then I decided to put it in these glass recipients because they are similar to urns. So I was thinking on the idea of souvenir, that is like the Latin word that is to come down, that is like the concept of a ruin, something that is dying. But also the fact that we sometimes keep the remains of our relatives that pass away on urns, like we want to keep them, but we cannot. Then when I came, then I met you, and I realized like, oh, they are working with this type of things. I was seeing the work of LEYLA, and I was like, okay, there are people approaching in different ways. And then I found the church, and I had to think like, okay, I want to see how other people relate to that concept of time. So the world is big, and there are many people working on that, but for me, I felt like empathy with these works, and I wanted to see how it could be to have a conversation with you all and with the different pieces. For example, in LEYLA's work, I felt like, okay, there's like a cycle, so it's like kind of, you don't have to die, you continue. The problem is like kind of solved. And then I had also like to think like in this like the promise of a future, and I was thinking also, but it's a soap, and a soap is its function is to go away. No, it's like it's going to disappear. So. And then in the work of Sonia, that it's always like really subtle, but it's shocking now. It's like you feel like in a really delicate way, like I don't know. I'm just saying my perspective, no, because I felt like saying it. I'm not a curator or anything like that. Then you feel like I don't know how to say that in English, like this interrupting point, like some of your paintings are like suddenly cut. That's a bit like shocking, but they are really beautiful and subtle and like calm. But something is like, poof, something went, yeah. And then you have like these frozen images, and some people recognize what they were, but not it's not necessarily obvious. Your work made me think on how is to put more people, because I feel a bit like a bit of the pain on scratching, like there, and then you are also like the materials and like the found objects that then they are really little, and then you make like a monument of them in the installations, and the different layers of materials like the walks and this one, yeah. Somehow I wanted to inquire to collect maybe also like how other people deals with the same thing, and I found that yesterday, and I found that beautiful, like seeing how different people. I was too confusing. I don't know. Yeah. So yeah.
It's a nice. There is there are islands, but there is a connection, and everybody's a kind of thinking unconscious. It's not always in your full being here as a human, but the unconsciousness of the things is a connection. Visuality is what we perceive as person is subjective, but there is a connection under the layers. That's nice, because we're three cultures sitting here. We're just humans. We got the same connection and the same vibe that keeps on doing what we are doing. We were all in one circle, making, same, the one, the other, continuous. There's a deep meaning for us keeping doing these things. And that's the connection, I think. It's not...
It's great to see that we're all dealing with this same idea through different mediums and scales as well, at different parts of the world. And I think you said that you weren't a curator, but you seem to have selected a really interesting bunch of people that are doing really different things that seem to gel well in this space. Yeah, great. Really good. It's a nice conversation between everyone, I think. So, thank you for doing it.
Oh, thank you. I suggested. Thank you. For example, Johan, I never see his work before, but then he was like, he contacted me and he was asking me things, and then I realized that he had one thing, and it's maybe it's too emotional how I also think of that, but his project, his pieces are, he thinks on architecture and the changes of architecture and how the life of the families have changed as well. So he was speaking about like families gather to drink the chocolate and everything in Bogota, in our city, and then you have a lot of bars and nightclubs and everything, and the dynamics start to change between